Hi guys, welcome back to Two Worlds Collide podcast. On today's episode, we have Jeremiah Wilber. Jeremiah started his military career as a military police officer before stepping into the world of special operations as a US Army Green Beret. He's seen combat in some of the most intense war zones on earth. From his deployment to Iraq in 05-06 to later fighting the Taliban in Afghanistan as a Green Beret and returning to Iraq to battle ISIS in some of the most intense modern warfare. But his mission didn't end when he left the military. Jeremiah has continued to fight, this time for something even bigger. Through his work with the Warparty Movement, he's helping rescue and protect the vulnerable, carrying on the warrior ethos beyond the battlefield. This episode isn't just about war stories. It's about what it means to be a warrior, how to stay in the fight for the right reasons, and what life really looks like after combat. Silence protects, evil wins, speak up, until every voice is heard. All right, you ready to go?
Yes, sir.
Jeremiah Wilber, mate, welcome to Two Worlds Collide podcast. How you going?
Good, sir. Good, sir. Thanks for having me.
No, you're welcome. Mate, you're up in Montana?
No, I live in Colorado right now.
Colorado, yep.
Yes,
sorry
sir.
about that. Yep. Nice and cold there, you were saying before.
Yes, yeah. Today's one of the first days the sun's kind of out, and it's just above freezing today for a high.
Yeah. And you guys live at altitude as well, don't you?
Yes, my house is about 8,500 feet. I don't know what that is in kilometers for you folks down there, but
I think it's a couple K.
Yeah. So we get it gets pretty cold. And we're kind of in where I live is basically like familiar with the Rocky Mountains. It's basically where the Rocky Mountains end and the plains start. So it's kind of high plains, a little bit of forest, a little bit of that, through the area I live. And then it's directly east of me is nothing but the American plains.
Yeah, that's cool. You'd get some pretty amazing views out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's beautiful country out here for sure.
Yeah, I'm in Adelaide, so that's South Australia, and different worlds that we live in. I'm pretty close by the beach, or like we live in a coastal town of a couple million people. But the other day it was like 43 degrees, so that would have been 105 Fahrenheit. So
it's miserable.
Yeah. It's just mate, everyone stays in really. It's an air-conditioned game, that time of the year, so everyone's just staying inside and trying to stay out of the heat. But yeah, look, mate, a lot to get through. Your former Green Beret military career, some of the stuff that you're doing now with the Warparty Movement, really taking upon yourself to sort out some of these critical issues with the Native American population. So, mate, heaps to dive through. Now, did you just want to sort of tell me a bit about yourself, how you grew up, where'd you grow up, and we'll roll from there.
Yeah, for sure. So, I grew up about half my life, my I would say adolescent life in Montana. My dad was just a hardworking blue collar guy. He did a lot of cowboy work, worked at the talc mine, stuff like that. And then my mom. My mother is Muscalero Apache, and she met my dad after she moved up to Montana. And same thing, she just was a cowgirl and did a bunch of ranch work and stuff. Kind of hopped all over Montana. But it was really cool, just growing up where, all my heroes were cowboys and all I ever wanted to be was a cowboy. And basically like real life cowboys and Indians, because I'm mixed race, so I'm a half breed, and we go to all the powwows and stuff. And it's just an amazing childhood, and then always just outdoors nonstop. My dad guided a lot of elk hunts, and I was always out hunting with my dad or hunting with my mom, very simple life. I mean, we lived in a little cabin for most of it up in the mountains outside of a little town called Ennis, Montana. And then my dad, he wanted to become a flight nurse. And my father was also in the military, before I was born. So he put himself through college, kind of used the military to pay for his college stuff and became a nurse, and then got a job a couple years later, with Flight for Life down in Las Vegas. So when I was about 13 or 14, I think, we moved to Las Vegas. So I spent all my high school years before I joined the Army in Las Vegas, which was quite a culture shock, being, living in the places I lived in Montana. Was always, kind of out in the middle of nowhere, pretty country. So a lot different moving to a big city, but, they taught me a lot. I learned so much. I learned, I had this upbringing of like this very warrior spirit, cowboy code, very gentleman, tough, rugged gentleman, never let anybody see you cry type of stuff. You're never, nothing ever hurts, just these rugged dudes, and, from sports, from all of it, that's just how it was. And then same kind of vibe, but where we lived at wasn't a very good neighborhood. And, it's also kind of, I got my nickname, the Ghetto Vaquero. So a vaquero is like a cowboy in Spanish. And, we lived in the ghetto in Las Vegas, and, I just, got a lot of street smarts and was around, lots of culture, lots of, Mexican culture, lots of Black culture, which really kind of helped me, kind of guided me, giving me a little bit of swagger, a little bit of a chip on my shoulder for who I was and my background. Really kind of set me up for getting ready to go into the military, I think.
I just got a couple of questions out of that. Just with your dad being in the military, I have any sort of time I talk to American military people, they've always had this like generational thing where it's either been their dad or their granddad, or, some people can be like 6th or 7th generation going into the military. So, you joining the military because your dad was in there, was that a big part of why you wanted to go as well?
Yeah, and it wasn't just my dad. So, my great grandfather was in World War One. This is on my dad's side. My great grandfather was in World War One. He was an infantryman in France, and then my grandfather, he actually lied about his age and tried to join the Marines, and he was too young. And then he kind of started out at he said he was 15, and he tried to join the Army, too young. Got it right, told the Navy he was 16. He had his mom sign it. So he was 14 years old when he actually joined the Navy for World War II. And he's pretty highly decorated. He's got, he was in, Operation Cartwheel. So he was landing amphibious assault boats, driving. He was a driver for him, for the Marines during that operation. And he got like 6 boats shot up from underneath him, and he'd jump in the water and swim out. He was just a young cowboy from, San Diego. So he's an old school vaquero, and, surfer, kind of rad, kind of California lifestyle, and that, starting out. So he's good in the water. So, he did Operation Cartwheel. I believe he was turned 16 right before that one happened. So I heard a lot of, stories from my grandfather growing up like that. And my dad, my dad was in, all the stuff in the 80s, the Panama and those kind of deals. In the National Guard. So I saw some of that as a young kid. Or even my dad just mobbing or getting ready to do things. And then on my mom's side, my grandfather, he was in the Korean War, and he has a Silver Star, in the Marines. He was a PFC, and he attacked a machine gun nest and basically, kind of shifted fire and took out an entire machine gun nest that had his whole platoon pinned down. So I was always been around, the military, that warrior culture. And then, as a kid, I that's all I played was just cowboy stuff or Army. And I had all my dad's gear and, camouflage my face, and my dad would teach me real tactics and stuff. And, I had a blast with it, man. If you asked me what I was going to be when I was 4 years old, I'd tell you I was going to be an airborne ranger. And then in the native side, all the powwows and stuff we go to, all the old veterans, the old warriors, they're dancing. They get honored first, and they're dancing with their old division patch on their shield and stuff like that. And it's just a very, Native Americans serve at a higher rate than any other race in our country. So in the Native culture, being a warrior and protecting Turtle Island, the continent of North America is very honorable, and it's just kind of what's in your DNA so there's so much honor and prestige to those warriors. So I saw that a lot, and just being able to idolize these guys from that were in the Army. That was just always really cool to me, and I just knew I was going to be in the Army since I was, like I said, probably 3 or 4 years old.
Yeah, that's cool. Especially that generational thing with, with your like connected history through your mum's side.
Yeah.
It almost sounded, like they respect that warrior type mentality, right? Because that's pretty much what you were as a Native American coming through for years and years. So that's cool, man. That's a really cool backstory. I know. Whenever I talk to American people like that, there's always some really, really cool and fascinating backstory of how their families have fought in Korea, Vietnam, World War One, World War Two. It's not really like that in Australia. I think on my mum's side, I think her granddad was in World War One. But I don't think anyone from my dad's side and anyone else like that. So, like the only person I know out of my family that was military was my cousin, and he was KIA over in Afghan, probably 18 months before I went there. So I've got a little bit of family history in terms of that. But in regards to your family history and most Americans I talk to, yeah, it's not that generational thing, right? As you do here in Australia. A lot of Australians just join because either they're in for the thrill of it or they love their country and stuff like that. Do you also find in America that people also join because like there's nothing else? Like they might be, do you know what I mean? Like they might not have a job or anything like that. Because I know Australia can be quite an easy place to live in regards to that. Our unemployment rate is really low. Our homeless rate is really, really low. So do you think a lot of people in the military in America, do you think they have no other option?
Yeah. So when I also add, all my uncles, on my mom's side and my dad's side, they're also on the Army, Vietnam era, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So, I'm also just kind of looking at it from my family, like some of the reasons why, like talking to my uncles and my grandpa and stuff, like why they joined, why they did what they did, and then also my recent experiences. I was also a drill sergeant in the Army for 2 years. So I do have a lot of experience with stories and, talking directly to these civilians basically and training them to be soldiers. So I have seen, quite a big range of, why people join the military. For the most part, I think that, a lot of them are very patriotic people. They really feel like they are defending, freedom. They believe in what America stands for, and they want to protect it. The other thing is college isn't right for everybody, and I think, whether if you just kind of jacked off in high school or something, you didn't get great grades, or you don't really know what you're going to do with your life, the military is a great option. Even if I'll just go do 4 years, you're getting college benefits, you're getting something, you're getting out of town, you're getting out of the place you live. So I've seen a lot of that too. And then there are people, who say, I had to join the military because there was literally nothing else for me. It was either I lived in such a bad area where there's zero jobs, there's nothing for me to do, rural to all the way to, inner city. Like, man, if I don't get out of this city, like I'm going to die, I'm going to go to jail, and trying to really push themselves in the right direction, using the military as a stepping stone for that.
Yeah. Did you, especially growing up in Vegas, did you find that real like tough, hard upbringing? Did you have guys that would like, I need to get out of here?
Yeah, I had a lot of guys that I went to school with that joined the military, and I think a lot of it was just because just wanted to get out of Las Vegas, just get me out of this place. That's kind of how I felt. Some of my buddies were. I already knew I was going to do it, since I was young, but I did have that feeling too of like, man, I need to get out of here, especially Vegas is kind of a weird town too, because it is a city and it's known for everything that people know Las Vegas for, but it's also just, a normal place, a normal big city, or an average size, it's a pretty big city. So, I think that, and it's kind of secluded. It's in the middle of the desert. A lot of people I know never been outside of anything outside of Las Vegas. So I think there was like a little bit of adventure there, and just like you said, just kind of like, man, I got to get the heck out of here. So I definitely feel that from some of my buddies that I talked to that joined I went to school with.
Yeah, I've been to Vegas 3 times. And only for 5 or 6 days. I can't take any more of it. But that's because you're on the party. That's because you're on the party side of it. So
yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk about your military experience now. You just joined the military. What was it like? Sort of, day one? Were you freaked out? Were you scared? The shock of capture, that sort of stuff. Yeah. And then maybe just roll through your military career from there, and then we'll eventually get to your Green Beret, and then some of your deployments.
For sure. So I joined similar to my buddy Cope from Canada. I joined when I was in high school. So I did like a delayed entry program. So I was able to like go to drill and like go to these, because I initially joined in the National Guard in 1998. I was still in high school, so I was going to drill. They send you like a little mini boot camp, and teach you what you need to know. They yell at you and get you prepared for basic training. But for me, it was like I loved it. I grew up playing sports. I played football, and I did lots of martial arts. So I was actually kickboxing and doing karate since I was like 13 years old. At a pretty high level, I won lots of tournaments. I was ranked top 10 in the world for a couple years. So I had this like extreme competitive edge about me. And one of the things I always loved about practice, football practice, whatever, was just like, I love watching other people suffer and like me just destroy them and know that I'm fine and I'm not suffering, and like training and physically preparing my mind and my body for those types of events, to the point of, even gassing myself out to, exhaustion or whatever. Like, just, there was no quit. And that's been something I've always said since I was a little kid. And, I really think it came from just fighting. I mean, I've been fighting since, I was 2 or 3 years old. Anybody that remembers me as a young kid, Montana was weird, in the 80s and the 90s. My dad's a white guy married to an Indian lady. And, so I get it from both sides, from the Indians and from the white kids, and kind of back and forth. And, it was a little weird. So I fought a lot when I was a kid, and I just had that drive of like, I didn't care. And that kind of carried through sports and carried through everything, and obviously carried me through my military career. That enjoyment of just other people suffering and I'm having a good time, so when I went to basic training, I actually went the following year of summer of 1999, and I went to basic training. I was actually an MP, and the reason why I joined the National Guard was I actually got my girlfriend pregnant when I was in high school, and I was like, man, this kind of threw me for a loop. I need to. I'm a dad. I'm gonna be a dad. I got to take care of this baby. And my initial plan was, because my dad was at this time the program director for Mercy Air. So he's the head flight nurse running all the programs. All his pilots were all like Vietnam era, Mac VSOG, flying all these LURS commando stuff from like 101st and air commandos in the Air Force. So he had these very elite pilots that were all former military that flew for that the rescue helicopter, the flight medics. So I would plan, they had a program that was called High School to Flight School. So what I was going to do is, and you can't do it until, I think you had to be a certain age at that time, but I had all the paperwork done and I was working my way towards that. That was my plan. I was going to try to go be an aviator in the Army and go be a warrant officer and fly helicopters. So that kind of threw me for a loop. And when I joined the National Guard, the way it works is they only have a certain amount of units. So you have to pick which unit you want to be in. I think one was like an armor unit, and then one was a medical unit. And I was like kind of opposite of my dad. I was like, I don't want to be no medic, So another was an MP. I was like, yeah, an MP is cool. Like, be a cop, and learn some police stuff or whatever. And it was also kind of a weird way. Like, I'd gotten in trouble in high school and just done some dumb shit. It was like, man, this may be my way of giving back and like, being understanding some of these kids, or in my mind, right? I'm just thinking a cop. I don't know that it's military police is way different. It was a culture shock after, really realizing what a military police is. It's not, not in a squad car all the time. So anyway, I went through basic training and AIT, which is your individual training, at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri in 1999 as an MP. While I was there, I just was like, man, I want to do this all the time. Like, there's no way that I'm going to go back to Las Vegas. And, I was actually had a job working at Costco in the meat department. I cleaned all the butchers. I cleaned up after the butchers at the end of the night, and it was a fun job. Pressure washing, the butchery. So I just didn't, just nothing seemed to me. I wanted that adventure. I loved basic training so much. I loved being a soldier so much, and I knew it was my calling. It was what the Creator made for me to do, my whole life. So when I graduated basic training, I went home and basically just before I even left, my drill sergeant told me to do it. I started the process of getting out of the National Guard and transferring into the regular Army. So I graduated basic training in November of 1999, and then I ended up getting sent to my first duty station, which was Fort Hood, Texas, in January of 2000. So I had about the average, same thing any other soldier did that graduated me. They get to go home for a couple weeks and then have Christmas and then report to their unit. So, and then I spent 2 years at Fort Hood, Texas. I was just a regular MP. We did we do a lot of like kind of Cav Scout work. A lot of people who've been deployed to Iraq, kind of early on, realized that everybody kind of did the military police mission, which is, area security, route clearance, convoy security, those kind of things. So a lot of training in that. And then we did what we call work the road, which is like you're a law enforcement officer for the base. And then, I went over to SRT, which is like the SWAT team. And that's kind of my first taste of like, wow, I really enjoy this stuff, and we served high risk warrants and things on base. At that time before 9/11, Fort Hood was an open installation. So it was open to the public. So not only it was it was the biggest military installation in the world, has the most soldiers on it in the world, but it's also open to the public. So there's major crime, lots of crazy stuff going on. So for SRT, I mean, we were doing, it was my first taste of really, really getting involved in some serious stuff. We even had a bunch of call outs and things, attempted suicides and some hostage, scenarios. Not all of them ended well, so I saw some kids, commit suicide right in front of me, my first 2 years in the Army. And then, from there, I kind of stayed on the same track. Because of that SRT resume I had, I was sent to Georgia. I was sent to Atlanta, Georgia at Fort McPherson, and I basically ran the SRT there and worked some small MP duties, patrolling and things, and then also was a part of the PSD that's there. So we protect all the dignitaries and whatnot, especially with that SWAT background. We're doing a lot of Overwatch security and prepping the area for all the dignitaries to come into. So lots of that stuff. And while I was there, is really when Iraq kicked off. So I was just itching to deploy. Right after September 11th happened, I was at Fort Hood, and it was a super crazy time. We had to lock the base down. And then, that after all this is going on, they're deploying troops and guys are going into Afghanistan. And then, shortly after that, the Rangers jump into Afghanistan and Afghanistan's going on. I had a company in my battalion that were actually going and flying to Kandahar and getting all the prisoners from the Rangers and then flying them to Gitmo. So we had guys that were deploying, and it was like, oh wow, this is cool. And then we ended up getting SRT. We had a special deployment to Egypt for just a training Operation Bright Star, and I don't know if you guys participated, but I know it's a lot of Five Eyes partners along with Egyptians and their whatever partners we have in the region. but we had to go there for additional force pro measures. So we went there to provide PSD, and then we also kind of did some like QRF and some support for the Marine Fast Team and the SEALs that were actually working in the Mediterranean. So it was a really cool experience there. Shortly after that, I get sent to Georgia, and then I'm just like itching to go to war. I'm like, dude, what the heck's going on? Like we're invaded Iraq. So I ended up re-enlisting to go back to Fort Hood, because I knew if I went back to Fort Hood, I would deploy. So I went back to Fort Hood, and then I did my first combat deployment from November 2005 to November 2006 in Iraq, and I was an MP squad leader at that time. And we were just stationed just north of Warhorse. And our job was to basically do, convoy security and route security, to all the big LSAs for resupply and things like that. My main job for most of my deployment was I did area security. So I patrolled from basically the southern edge of Kalis all the way up to Fob Cobra, so on Route Cheyenne. And then we were the sheriff in that area too. And people are familiar with what that means is like, if anybody gets hit or something happens to them, we're the immediate QRF for our battle space that we're operating in. That was my first deployment where, we physically lost people. People were, killed and blown up pretty good and pretty jacked up. They're all young kids. I had already lost two really good buddies one of them was my first team leader in the Army my first team leader at SRT. He was the Alpha team leader, and Shannon Smith, and he was killed the year before in Iraq. He got blown up by an IED, and then I had another buddy on SRT who was shot by a sniper. And so I've had I experienced, death and trauma like that, but not, firsthand, like it's in my face. I'm carrying guys and doing things like that. And then also, being the sheriff, being that QRF, we're responding to everything. And even if you show up late, and the area is secure, you're still trying to help these guys. And oftentimes one of the things that we would, try to assist with is understanding, your buddies just got blown up. They don't need to be the ones putting them in the body bag, so some things that weren't necessarily like these amazing gunfights and this crazy, all the glorious things you hear about war. It was more of a lot of we're responding to things. So a lot of casualty care, trying to help with 9 lines or just evac, or even just pulling security while all those things are going on. So definitely saw a lot, and my guys, those young kids, they were exposed to a lot. And when you see Americans and your own countrymen, like that, it's really heavy, weighs on you. And then it was really kind of my first real big starting to try to understand leadership and trying to lead, what's the epitome of leading from the front, so my guys will follow me anywhere. And how do I show them that warrior spirit and continue to do that? And the reason why, it's some kid sees a truck get blown up, and he may have never been blown up in his life, but he sees a truck get blown up. He's hearing all the convoy briefings and what's going on and the significant actions that the enemy's been taking. And one of his buddies gets killed. He has to go do that exact same job his buddy was killed doing the next day or throughout the rest of that day or whatever it is. And that is one of those things where, if you're as a leader, or if you don't have those leaders who lead from the front and know that they'll do exactly the same things they're telling you to do, and it's not fake, it's not just bullshit coming out of their mouths. Those are the good units. Those are the guys that, want to work for each other and especially on the battlefield, So one of the things I did to try to do that is, I did Friday night fights. I would box every Friday night. We had these big boxing smokers, and it would be, just get on the scale. And I was kind of the guy at 185 for almost a year straight, and that was kind of cool to do that and have my squad there cheering for me in my platoon and really try to show a warrior spirit. And we train a lot, and it was one of those things where it's from working out at the gym to where we eat, in the chow hall, the food we're eating, how I'm looking out for my guys. I really try to do a good job at that. who knows how good a job I did. It's hard to say, but that was where I really started to start trying to, I would say I was kind of figuring myself out as a leader. If that makes sense.
When you were trying to figure yourself out as a leader, especially leading guys that are, going to the scene for potential casualty and death, did you ever have any guys that sort of second question themselves? And like, if so, did you, was there a point of attack where you could sort of steer them in the right direction?
What I'm going to say is going to sound a bit cocky, but I'm going to explain it. I had another guy, my alpha team leader, Sergeant McCutcheon, and he was just one of the most freakish athletic kids I've ever seen in my life. Just a super jacked, dark-skinned black guy from Florida. And he was like, he should have been a pro athlete. I mean, he was just a freak, but he was also a savage. He also boxed. And our mindset he was just like me. We didn't allow weakness. We didn't allow like the thoughts, but we also did a lot of training and rehearsals and it wasn't just through like, I'm tough. My guys called me Wolverine, like the Wolverine, but my last name. And I honestly felt like, and I took it on as a burden. So that's why I'm saying it's going to sound cocky, but it was more of like a burden I carried, was that I feel like they felt like as long as I was with them, they were fine, no matter what was going to happen. Like we have Sergeant Wilber with us. And I took that very, very seriously. So, and so did my other team leader. And I think that those examples were very key to trying to motivate and not having those guys, second guess their own selves. The other thing I really like to do, and I learned, just growing up through the Army, was I always like to have their input, and like their why. I try to give soldiers some why behind things, when it's appropriate. I hate just being told something to do and you're like, what the fuck are we doing? And you don't understand why. Even if it's stupid, even if it's like, hey, Sergeant Major wants the grass cut because General so-and-so is coming tomorrow. Okay, fine. We cut the grass yesterday, but we'll cut it again today because you said, right? But like just whatever it is, silly to super serious things that we do in the military, I wanted to try to give some why behind that. And I allow my guys to give us a lot of input. And I think that gave them a lot of freedom of maneuver. The other thing I was really big on, and I learned this very early in the Army, was no one talks to my guys. No one messes with my guys. I don't care who you are. If you're walking down the street and the division sergeant major stops you to say hello and you're standing there at parade rest and you're talking longer than in passing, good morning, Sergeant Major, he's talking to you, I would run over there and tell you to leave and stand in front of the division sergeant major and ask him why he's talking to you and that I'm your squad leader and I will be addressed. And like, even if it was positive, because I just felt that was, if you're jacked up and you're doing something wrong, it's my fault. I'm doing something wrong as a leader for you to be in a position where somebody outside of me has to discipline you or correct you in anything. Because you're a representation of all of us. You're a representation of yourself first, but you're also a representation of all of us in that work together in this brotherhood. So that was like really my mentality. And I think I really started to kind of put that together, in my brain, the best way I could during that deployment.
Almost like you were just like a real, not father figure, but just like strong,
like a big brother is what I thought.
Yeah, like strong, like alpha male figure as well, where the guys could look to.
And I have to say this too, that deployment, I had one of the best leaders I've ever worked for, my platoon sergeant, was the same kind of guy. We called him Bam for big ass Mexican. He just looked like this giant Aztec warrior, and he was another guy that was like, if he was out there, people were like, well, we got Shorty with us, we're fine. And it was something that if I didn't have him as a leader, because I had already gotten into with the other platoon sergeant before him. And I don't think if I had him as a leader, I wouldn't have been able to develop my mindset and my attitudes for it in that way. I think I would have gone down a more salty, sour route and had more issues with my leadership. And that would have distracted me from actually trying to take care of my guys, in a way. It would have been counterintuitive. I'm thinking I'm taking care of them by, always fighting with leadership, and the opposite. It's a distraction. So I'm very grateful for that leadership during that deployment, for sure.
Also, as well, you talk about growing up in like a pretty tough, hard environment. Do you think that in some way shaped you to be the soldier that you became, or like the leader that you became?
Absolutely. I was around like just these very honorable, cowboy men at a young age, where like a handshake means something. You look you in your eyes when you talk. And then, fast forward to Las Vegas, around kind of these like gangbanger, kind of swagger, like cholo type guys who had this same kind of honorary code in a weird way, but with a little bit more like macho kind of attitude towards it. But it had to be backed up. And that was what my favorite thing about that rough environment was like, it wasn't fake. Like, you can't fake being tough. You don't fake getting a nickname. You don't fake having a reputation. Like, all those things are what these guys did. Now, is it the right, is that, that whether it's kind of criminal gray area or however they're acting, like, not saying that's okay, but just the way that kind of was embodied in me, and trying to navigate between those two differences, but also such similarities there. As a young man, as a teenager, and then as a young man in the Army, I definitely think it definitely helped me, to have that. And it took me a while. How do I navigate this? Sometimes I'm too ghetto, if you will, but, I definitely think that was huge for me to see both sides of that.
So you did Iraq in 05, 06.
Yes, sir.
What was after that?
After that, I was a drill sergeant. So I spent 2 years as a drill sergeant, and it was probably the best time of my military career. I love being a Green Beret, and we'll get into all that stuff. And my guys over there, and it's amazing. I'm still in awe that I was actually a Green Beret and served with those guys. But being a drill sergeant, those 2 years was the funnest times I had in the Army, the most impactful on people, and what I felt that I did for, the Army, as a soldier.
Yeah. Is it because of the influence you could have had over people?
Absolutely. So I remember there was like two things we kind of had to do at drill sergeant school that really stood out in my brain. And one of them was we had to read this book called Understanding Generation Y. And, basically I think that's millennials now is what Generation Y is, but it's this is in 2007. So it's like the old school way of thought. And unless you like grew up with an old wrestling coach or a football coach, or you had your dad was that way or something, most people in that age bracket don't think the way we do, where you just get told what to do and you execute that task and it's yes, sir, and you do it. The military had always been very that way, and that's how the military is. And now you have this new group of individuals that want to know the why behind things. Well, why do we do that, right? Like, why am I taking out the trash? It's not full. And the reason for that is, if you give them the why when it's pertinent or it's applicable to you, time management wise or whatever, it doesn't have to be all the time, but it needs to be sometimes. They won't question when I say like, when I'm like, Branford, when I start fucking rocking, you get all that ammo to gun truck 2. And you're like, Roger, Sergeant, ready. And we step out, we give you cover fire, and you run. Because I've given you the why so many times, you believe me as a leader, and you understand that, that I'm not just sending you off to do some dumb shit, right? Now, there's a time and a place for that why in the military. So we read that book, and that was when it really started to click for me of like, man, these kids are smart. Like, if you let them understand what we're doing, instead of just doing these training evolutions in basic training where we're just like dragging them through it, even though, there's smoke sessions and there's discipline and all those other things, we're still training them to be soldiers, and they need to comprehend this information, retain this information to move forward. It's also stuff they're going to have to study and memorize and learn. So sometimes they're going to want to know the why behind it, because it doesn't make sense to them right now as they're learning to be a soldier. And someone who's been a soldier, for 7, 8, 9, 10 years, and now you're teaching them, it's easy for you to forget, why do you do this? Like, why do we, so that was like a really cool thing in drill sergeant school that really started getting me clicking in drill sergeant school. And then, the other one was, we had a guest speaker, and he was saying, it's 2007, before you can be Instagram famous and be YouTube, whatever, was saying that, this is the one time in your life, none of you guys are rock stars or actors or anything. This is going to be the one time in your life you get a chance to influence thousands of people, and you're going to imprint your impression on these people, and they'll forever carry that forward. And every single soldier, no matter what army you went through in the world, knows and remembers their drill sergeants, the guys who taught them, the ones who initially received them, whatever that basic training phase is like. Everyone remembers that, and I want to remember for the good and not being the shitty one. Because everybody kind of has that guy they can pick out and they want to model themselves behind. I definitely had that. I was influenced so much by one of my drill sergeants, and I felt like this was a way for me to pay it forward and try to influence these guys. The other big thing was, the Army's small, and everyone who's graduating, all these kids from 07 to 09, they're going to war, right? They're also going to go to war with my buddies, my soldiers. They could be at war with me. When I'm done with that duty as a drill sergeant, you go back to your units. You go back to the units, and some of those kids are in your units, in your squads, in your platoons. They're in amongst your ranks. So I looked at it that way too, of like the seriousness of where all these kids could be going. And if I can be the first touch point to get them focused on being a warrior and learning what they need to know, and help their career in the Army, but also help them survive in combat, help them be an asset to their units when they get there. So that's how I took on that from that conversation, from that guest speaker. And that's why being a drill sergeant was one of the funnest and coolest experiences I've ever had in my life.
You don't normally hear people talk about being a drill sergeant as, such a really life-changing, life-altering, and like a positive role. You hear of drill sergeants. I mean, like those postings in the Australian Army, they are like, people don't want them.
Yeah, it's the same. It's the same in our Army and in the Marines and stuff. Guys don't really want those. The really good ones. And don't get me wrong, like, I wasn't soft or didn't yell at them and smoke the shit out of them and do all the other things. But all the really good ones understand that, and they understand that, like, these kids are going to war, and we are everything they have to set them up for success, and carry them forward, and those are the good ones. And then you have just like, in every echelon, you have duds and turds and people that just exist, so, there's some of that as well. And that's unfortunate because, I look at it as like, when you're a soldier, that was my favorite. This is one of my favorite things about being a soldier, was when you're a soldier, you execute tasks. And even being a Green Beret, even my left and right limits might open up, and my tasks might not be exactly dictated to me. I just need the end state dictated to me. You're still executing orders. You're still executing tasks. And no matter if it's, and I learned this from, my grandfather, my dad, like, no matter what you do it to the best of your ability. Your name's on it. So if you clean the kitchen and wash the dishes for your mom, like, it needs to be squared away better than you left it, just as good as she does it. If you mop the floor, or if whatever you're doing, it's always to the best of your ability, because it's like, if you can't do easy things well, how are you supposed to do hard things and accomplish tasks and progress in life, whether it's a sport, or it's, a skill you want to learn, whatever it is. If you do, I hate that 110%, give 100% in everything you do as a soldier. For me, I struggle with the guys who don't like being somewhere. I get it. You don't want to be stationed somewhere. You don't want a certain duty. But once you're there, the Army makes you do what they want. There's nothing you can do about it. They own you. Uncle Sam owned your ass. You got to do what you got to do. You signed up for that. Like, that as a soldier. So once you get there and you get settled, you might as well just do a killer ass job and keep representing your name and who you are. As an individual, because yes, we're soldiers and there's not a lot of individuality, but at the same time, there's an immense amount of individuality in who you are as your reputation and what you bring as a soldier. So I really love that part of it.
That is really, really cool about, trying to get the best out of people. But you brought out a point before as well, like you're training kids to go to war. Like like America was flat in war at the moment at that time. So like, you had to make sure that their first impressions of the army or the military were like serious, professional, because there's no one to come save you when you're ever on the battlefield, and like you had to be training these kids first up. So was there a big part of that about you as well? Like, I need to get these kids ready. They need to be switched on straight away.
One, it was just so fun to go to work. My dad always told me, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And I've always just taken that, everything I've ever done. And the Army was that for me. Being a drill sergeant was that for me. So having that mentality going into work with those kids, and then also being so competitive. So it was cool. We break down where like you can be the best platoon at shooting and this and the best company. And there's a lot of competitive things that you can actually kind of reward the soldiers with through their training. And, they're as good as what you put into them. So then it becomes one of those things where you're also competing against everybody else and the other units or even other platoons, because it's like, we want to shoot the best. For our platoon to shoot the best, we're going to have to put the most work in as drill sergeants to train these kids to shoot better than my buddies who are putting just as much work in on their kids to get them to shoot. So there's a lot of like that. So basically, instead of looking at this like big picture, from like a 10,000 foot view, I'm just winding it in and I'm taking it, like a week at a time or a training event at a time, and looking at it so small, because I think sometimes for me anyway, if I was to look at it and with this vast seriousness all the time, it would distract me and I wouldn't be able to really hone in on the given task. And how do I get to this end state at 10,000 feet, little by little by little, and we did do reminders all the time about, where they're going, what they're doing. And, especially as they get farther along in training and stuff, we share more with them about our experiences, and as they're learning more classes about, how to conduct an ambush or actions on contact or stuff, those are all taught by combat veterans and guys who have experience. So they're able to ask a lot of questions, and it does start to really hit once you start getting into the more combat side of, actually training missions and what they're going to be doing, possibly doing on the battlefield. So that seriousness really creeps in once they're in that phase and portion of training, kind of automatically.
Yep. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. That's cool that you got to experience that as well. And like I said before, it's also cool to hear that was some of your best times in the military.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, so let's move on to, what you did past that.
Yeah. So I just kind of knew once I was there, I was like, man, I don't know what I want to do next. I had already made rank really early in the Army. I had, done some really cool things as an MP. And there was Sapper School was on Fort Leonard Wood. Sapper School is basically, it's a leadership course. It's a lot like Ranger School. It's a patrolling course. But it's engineer focused. So it's focused towards demolition and sabotage, kind of be the epitome of a sapper. And I, was like, man, I'm going to go to Sapper School. So I kind of asked some guys. I used to train with some of the instructors at the Fight House, and they're like, yeah, man, all you got to do is show up with all your gear. And sometimes there's guys who are missing shit or don't do well on the PT test. And if you max out the PT test, you'll be at the top of the OML. It goes by the highest PT score and goes, 1 through however many standby slots they have. So I was like, okay, cool. So I got everything together and I went out there and crushed a PT test and made it into Sapper School. And it's a month long, really cool. It's the only course in the Army, like to this day right now, if someone was like, would you go back to it? Right now I go back to it in a heartbeat. As hard as it is, as much as it sucks, it was fucking amazing. And it was my first taste of like, I was there with guys from Ranger Battalion. I was there with guys that were Green Berets, from 1st Battalion and from 5th Group. I was there with all these, engineers, officers and engineer, staff sergeants and sergeants, like super experienced guys. And I'm the only MP there. And, no, excuse me. I actually went with, my platoon sergeant. He made it in as well. The same guy that Bam, from Iraq. So him and I went to Sapper school together, which is really cool. And, you're behind the power curve a little bit with some of the demolition stuff. Fortunately, being SRT, him and I both were SRT, and we were both familiar with building charges and doing interior breaching and exterior breaching. So we weren't total, retards on it. But just like everything in the Army, they teach you everything you need to know before you get tested on it or have to do it. The problem is it's just drinking from a fire hose. So the way it works is you do 2 weeks of general subjects, and it's basically, you wake up in the morning, you do PT, and then you go through, classes, and then you test on them, and then at night. And so we're talking super long days, from like 3:30 in the morning to like midnight, 1:00 in the morning. Sapper school is graded on a point system. So there's 1,000 points available during Sapper school. You have to have 700 points, and you have to have 50% goes in your patrols during the patrolling phase, just like Ranger school, to graduate. Each portion of these is something that's graded. So PT's graded, and there's like 250 points available for PT. So you wear a chem light around your neck, and if the instructor cracks your chem light, then you lose points that day. So it's like every single thing, it's like you're trying so hard because you got to get these points. There's a ton of mountaineering as well as maritime operations. So you do a bunch of mountaineering things out on the wall and at the cliff, and you're doing a bunch of climbing. And then you're also doing the same thing, maritime operation. You're doing a lot of helo casting, and there's a big boat, kind of 3 days with boats. Doing all the Navy SEAL shit, carrying them on your head type of stuff. And then the reason why I thought Sapper school was so awesome was because then you go into patrolling phase, and every single thing that you did in general subjects, you do it in patrolling phase. So when you receive a mission and you go on those fake missions during patrols, they'll actually give you like link up points. You have assets. You'll have like three CH-47s with a bunch of boats, and like you're infilling, doing a helo cast like on your patrol. It's really cool. The way they incorporate everything you learned. You use live demolition all the time. You're blowing stuff up, and just so fun. But also just the hardest thing I've ever done, the hardest 2 weeks of patrolling I've ever done in my life. Your rucksacks are as heavy as they can be. I mean, it's all things everybody's ever talked about when they talk about patrolling schools, Ranger school, or some commando school. It's just shorter, so, that was kind of my first taste. And I was there with those Green Berets and those guys from Ranger school or, Ranger regiment. And they were like, "What are you doing, man? Like, why are you an MP?" And I was just kind of like, "Oh, really?" So I ended up crushing it there, and really just, graduated the top of the class at that course. And, it was eye-opening for me. And then right after that, I had like the weekend off, and then I went through, the mandatory course, leadership school, to be, a sergeant first class in the Army. And then, while I was there, I kind of wiggled my way into a Ranger school slot, and Christmas Exodus, I take the little 2 weeks leave of Christmas. Funny story. So while I was at Sapper school, they called me Superman, all the other students in the class. And then even the instructors laughed because they knew they called me Superman. And they were like, on a lake day, they were like, "We found Superman's kryptonite. It's water." Dude, I'm from Montana. I'm like a fucking kid from Montana, didn't swim like that. I went to the ghetto. Like, we don't swim in the hood. I didn't know how to swim, dude. So like the lake swims, all that. And these guys are like riding jet skis around you. And it's nuts, dude. So at Ranger school, there's a pretty significant swim you have to test to get in. So, over that Christmas holiday, I had to get all of my gear ready for Ranger school and then learn how to swim. So my brother was dating a girl that was on the UNLV dive team at the time, and I went out and swam with her like 10 days straight, and learned how to swim well enough in my uniform and all that, to go to Ranger school. And then I started Ranger school in January. Graduated in March. I was very fortunate. I wasn't one of the recycle guys. blessed by God, I made it straight through. And then after that is when I decided, I'm this double tab MP, and I kind of had a talk with my sergeant major, and he said, "Do you want to have fun, or do you want, or do you want to, do you want to make rank, or do you want to have fun?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "You're being groomed right now to be regimental sergeant major, and your career path, obviously that's what you're going to be groomed for, is a sergeant major in the MP Corps." I had already hit the spot where like my rank, once I was done being a platoon sergeant, I was never going to be around soldiers again. I was going to be an admin, master sergeant and sergeant major. And I was like, hell no, dude. And he was like, then go to selection, go have fun, dude, go do what go do it. And, it was one of those things where, like, looking back on that, what we're talking about, from sapper school to ranger school, kind of back to back, and then going to selection back to back and getting selected. I was in the Army almost 10 years. I was in the Army for 10 years before I went to selection. I had to get a waiver to go to selection, actually. And I underestimated myself for so long, and it was one of those things where, like, a lot of it is from my childhood, a lot of that. I was bullied a lot, man. Like I said, I fought so much, and I was in this like self-defense mode of not knowing who I was. Like, what am I? Bullied all the way, high school, even though I was good at things, and just a lot of self-doubt, man. Even though I was like the fastest guy in the company, the best shot, like the best, like it was never, it was like almost humbling to a fault, the way I felt inside, that I didn't have the confidence. So like the sergeant version of me would see, the sergeant first class version of me as a Green Beret with all those tabs, and be like, there's no fucking way that's me, man. There's no way. So it was kind of cool that everything just happened, like all within a year, that I had done sapper school, ranger school, and went to selection and got selected.
Yeah. Did you doubt yourself during Green Beret selection?
No. So my self-doubt talks and my things, because I did karate and kickboxing, and when you're in a one-on-one sport and it's just you and another guy in a ring trying to beat the shit out of each other, and boxing, Iraq, all that, like there's some self-doubt there, but you have got to believe in yourself. And I've always fought, and I think it was kind of a fight for survival. I got beat up a lot and fought a lot of older kids and stuff. It was I'm putting everything out there. Like, everything I have is going to be, I'm laying it out. So I trained that way. I, fought that way in the ring. My whole life, I just felt like that. But I was never, as an MP, I was never like in that situation where, like, yep, you're going to go to ranger school, or I get to prove myself like that. I've done competitions and things, and I won a bunch of like big ruck march races and stuff. But every time I did those, it was like, yeah, I'm going to win, or I'm going to be in a body bag. Like, I don't care, like just complete sacrifice for any lack of my body. I did not care. One of my favorite football players of all time is Ronnie Lott, and he was a safety for the San Francisco 49ers. And he was just known for just smashing dudes, like no care, no will for his body whatsoever. And like, I kind of had to fight that fighting style as a young kid. I was a little skinny, little twerp, who fought bigger kids, and I just had to go, all in. So when I went to sapper school and ranger school and selection, my mentality was literally, I'm graduating with the tab, or I'm leaving in a body bag. Like, there was never a plan B for me. And when I got to selection, I never even thought about what happens to me if I don't get selected. What kind of unit am I going to go to? What's my next job? Not one time. I literally just was like, I'm at selection. I'm getting selected. There is no plan B. Like, burn the boats. Let's go. I'm here, and that was my mentality through all of selection.
Yeah. Nice. So just talk me through that selection phase.
Yeah.
A bit, how tough was it? How many days was it? Like, what was also the dropout rate?
Man, I can't remember, crazy specifics. But I think I was roster number 384. I think I was three. I was high three somethings, and my last name's Wilber. So there was probably 450 or something like that guys in my class, and I remember I think they selected like 70 something in the 70s from that. I went through I want to say it's like 28 days or something, almost a month. Selection was it's one of those things where like if you're ready for it and you train and you can like run and you can ruck and you can do land navigation and you're not scared of the woods and you're not scared of the dark, and there's like a lot of things that are kind of there, but it's game on for anyone. Like you can make it. It's not as hard as people make it out to be, but yet at the same time it is. Like I was in the best shape of my life, like after training for sapper school and then going to ranger school and then getting my weight back on me. And I had literally just lived with a 100-pound rucksack on my back for months. And I was down in Savannah, Georgia, and I ran barefoot on the beach all the time. I rucked barefooted on the beach. I rucked in the sand, and I just put miles and miles and miles on, and did a lot of practical, true functional fitness work, and really prepared myself to be there. So looking back on it, it wasn't like there was hard moments, definitely tough times, but there was nothing I never felt like I wasn't prepared for or couldn't get through. And the way it works is like most of the time you're kind of doing one event a day through selections or through the selection until you hit land nav. And land navigation is where we really, really start to get everybody gets dropped out. The first initial band of pussies will leave when we do rifle PT and sandbag PT, and that's like the stuff that people seen on TV. There was one where like the guy's puking in the pit and he makes him put his puke in his pocket, and like that day is probably one of the first, like if you've never wrestled or like played football or like, had those like real, and for you guys probably rugby, had like one of those practices, like it'll break you. It's basic training on steroids, like it's kind of smoke sessions, if you will. That's kind of the first. So it's log PT and rifle PT, and those where you start to see guys falling off. And then the next big wave is at the land nav site. So you go out to land nav. It's like a full week, and you're averaging between 15 to 30 miles a day that you're putting on in the woods, walking. The cool thing is they teach you everything you need to know. They do. If you could go there not knowing how to do land navigation at all, and if you just pay attention and do it the way they teach you, they're going to teach you exactly what you need to know. The attrition rate's very high at land nav because when you do I still did the STAR course, which is basically you start at midnight, you have 12 hours from midnight to noon. You have to find 5 points, and they give you 1 point at a time. And the ground you cover is so big, you'll have two maps, adjoining maps, and you basically will go to 1 point, and it'll just send you to the other side of the map. On the other point, you just make this big star, and then you finish, and you have to be done by midnight. That one is it's a pretty brutal day. You're in North Carolina. The draws are really, really thick. They're really hard to get to. You're not allowed to use any roads or anything like that. So you have to be very careful, especially at night, that you're actually going where you're supposed to be, the direction of travel in those draws. Guys go in and come right back out the same direction they started, and they're nuts. They're rough. They suck. So there's, that is a very high attrition rate. I had a lot of fun with it, just walking around in the dark and just running it all night long in the dark. And I play these games all the time, and it sounds silly, but I even do it now, running a lot. And I know you're an ultra runner, so sometimes I run with no music and sometimes I run with music. But a lot of times when I'm running with music, I literally run with the same song on repeat for like 2 hours straight. And since I was a kid, I've had this like biggest imagination, because I was this half-breed kid and I always thought I was going to be this mountain man. And my mom always told us stories of mountain men and the Indians and warriors. And I just grew up with this so much culture. And my mother always told stories and read me books. I didn't even have a TV till I was like 17. And so my brothers and I would just play. My grandma would make us, all like we had like real badass kit. My grandma's Indian and my mom's Indian. They're sewing us stuff and making us buckskins, and just wild imagination. We ran around. So when I run to this day, I often think that like I'm being chased by someone, or I imagine myself like I'm a messenger. I have to carry this message from this fort to get the soldiers to move up here, or warning the village or whatever. And that's kind of like the mode I was in that night. I just kind of felt in that like, hey, you got to take, whether it's, whatever it is, taking this medication to this aid station. I got to get this, and then helping these people, whatever. I just always make it this game, but it's always a game that rewinds me like 200 years back into history. And I think that's just my connection to the creator, my ancestors, being native. I think that's always something that is just like been able to help put my mind in a different place when I'm doing something extremely physical, when it's just like me and Jesus talking and it hurts so bad, so I have this like crazy imagination, and that was something that really got me through a lot of the things in selection.
Just being able to like put yourself somewhere else. Almost, I do the same thing in my running. So when I run, I do not run with music. I've run like over 100-kilometer races.
That's like doing psychedelics.
Yeah, mate. Yeah,
some deep thinking there. Dude.
Yeah, you do. You have these wild run. You can be like 12 hours into a run. I've still got 30K to go on a course. I could be running, well into the night. And it's like your mind just goes somewhere else. And it's like this like out of body experience. Running at that exhaustion level with no music, and you've only got yourself and your thoughts. But I really enjoy it. There's a real big part of me that loves that sort of stuff.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's cool as. So after that selection phase, what did you do from there? You still had a couple deployments?
Yeah. So then kind of round out selection, it's, then you hit team week. That's the big one that everybody, gets dropped out in. I went to, then you start the Q course. So the Special Forces qualification course. It's one of those things where a lot of guys don't understand. Also, there's also a pretty big attrition rate just in the course. So I started off, I went to Russian language course, and then you do SUT, small unit tactics, which is kind of a smaller version of Ranger school. And then you go to SEER school. So you're getting, all your survival training, you're getting beat up and slapped around and all that POW camp stuff. And then, I was actually selected to be at 18 Bravo, which is a weapons sergeant. And, I almost didn't graduate the Q course, to be honest. I was in the 18 Bravo course, and I ended up the very first day, and this did save me and help me. And I looked at this whole time I was there at the course. It's like, I'm an E7 with a lot of experience. I'm wearing these 2 tabs on my shoulder. I have to represent what a sapper and what a ranger is. And when people look at me with that, like, they expect so much out of me. And I was kind of the sergeant major through the whole class. I was in charge of all the guys. I'd be the direct guy that went to all the cadre, because I was the most senior at being an E7. And when I got to the Bravo course, everybody else went inside, and they pulled me out and took me outside and smoked me for like 2 hours. And the instructor was like, "You shouldn't be an E7 in this course. You will not graduate." I just hit cadre roulette, man. And, it was one of the toughest times in my life, dude. Like, everything had been so easy, and because I work so fucking hard to make it easy when I'm at work. And it's like, I'm hours in the gym, hours rucking, hours running. I'm everyone else is like, my buddies are partying. Like, dude, I would run to I did everything I could to be the best soldier I could possibly be, especially in this time. So it was one of those things where, like, dude, it hit hard. I was like, bro, this dude is fucking killing me. Like, how am I supposed to do this? So ended up, long story long, I went through the whole 18 Bravo course, and then that cadre kind of saw his window. I ended up getting MRSA in my knee from wrestling, and I couldn't go out to the last field exercise, so I got recycled a class until my knee was, I got out of the hospital. I actually was in the ICU for a while. Like, I didn't, I caught it kind of late. I was trying to muscle through it and just get through the course. End up, pretty bad, significant issue there with MRSA. Well, I got recycled. I went back out with the next guys. I had a terrible attitude. I was so fucking angry. And my very warrior spirit mindset and aggression did not match with the guys in this class that I had with everybody else in the class, because they had been with me for the last year and a half, me leading them and being with them. I perform well, but we have what we call pinks and blues. So you do peer assessments at every phase in selection. And up to this point, I had literally been peering number one in everything I did. They break you up to 2 different ODAs in the Bravo course, and I was a team sergeant of one of them. And we got pinks and blues back, and there's 13 guys on a team. So I had 13 pinks, all from the other team, and 12 blues, all from my team. And the cadre saw this as an opportunity to kick me out of the course. So they recommended me for an NTR, never to return. So I'm in scramble mode, man. Like, dude, what in the fuck? So I ended up like talking to some other cadre that I had before me and said, hey, this is what's going on with me. Like, you don't have to put your neck out or anything. I'm just asking you for a shot. Just what do you think of me? Am I a guy you'd want on your team? And I had a cadre member from every single phase of training during the Q course go speak on my behalf to the sergeant major. And by the time I went and saw the sergeant major, I was already good to go. And he said, I thought I was going to go Robin Sage and graduate. And he's like, well, I'm not going to go back on my cadre. You need to go to the 18 Echo course, which is communications, which I fucking hate computers. I barely know how to work my cell phone. I'm like, dude, this is nuts. So I spent some extra time in the Q course, but I will get to where all this leads in the future, and then, I became an 18 Echo. I graduated in 18 Echo. And I, went through Echo course. I ended up being one of the, honor grad students, and was back on track, and everything was fine, and right after I graduated, I went to 3rd Special Forces Group, and I deployed immediately. Like 2 weeks after I graduated, being a Green Beret, I deployed to Afghanistan.
Pretty much straight away, they had you overseas.
Yes, sir. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So talk me through that deployment then to Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So what year was it as well?
That was 2013, and I spent almost a year in Afghanistan, all of 2013. So I think I got there like the very March 1st or 2nd or something like that, and I left in December.
Yeah. Okay. You would have been. I left right at the start. Either right at the start of 2013 or right at the end of 2013. I think it was right at the end of 2013, around that like mid-December period.
Yeah.
That's when we got out of country.
And I had done like bounce back and forth. Like I'd done some other, done other stuff, but basically like right after that, I'm boom, go over there. I was initially signed to 1st Battalion, and what I was going to be was just like, I was just going to go to 1st Battalion as a new guy and usually work AST, which is, like you're working like, in the 3 shop behind all the big screens and helping the battle captains control stuff. So, and then you're the go-between for your company at battalion. So anytime the B team or people need stuff from the battalion, you do that, or people fly in, you go pick them up. You're kind of just like a bitch boy basically for your company that works at battalion. That's what I thought I was going to go do until I figured out a team. So I land in when I land in country, it's dark outside. We land in Bagram, and there's this dude, and he's like, hey, Wilber. He's like yelling my name, and I'm like, oh, what's up? I run over there. I'm like, hey, and it's the, S3 Sergeant Major. Hey, what's up, Sergeant Major? Jeremiah Wilber, introduce myself. He's like, hey, dude. He's like, you were supposed to go to 1st Battalion, but like, they're pulling you over here. You're on Camp Alpha saying you're on a task here. So I was like, oh shit. And I don't know this, but like while I'm flying to Iraq, between like, Iraq, so we're like Fort Bragg and then Germany for a night or whatever, and then get to Iraq. They needed, the PSD, one of the head PSD guys on Camp Alpha got fired. They were trying to scramble for a guy. And I had that background as an MP, and I had worked, some, augmentee stuff with special operations before as PSD. So basically, they were like, hey, I think we got a guy. So they just sent me over there, and it ended up being the best thing that ever could have happened to me as a new Green Beret, that ever happened to me, because I spent at 6 months basically being like the radio and security guy for all these the highest level of special operations in Afghanistan. So I went to every single briefing from every, whether it was an ODA or a SEAL platoon in a VSO site to, the guys from task force, to CIA briefings, to, every single outpost, every single thing I saw. And I was able to really start to understand the three levels of the battlefield. So I was no longer just looking at it from like the tactical and operational level. I was seeing strategic level things on the battlefield. I was also seeing, like, as a Green Beret and as special forces, how you can affect all three levels of those things on the battlefield, even just as a small ODA, 12 guys in country, somewhere all alone, unafraid. So I saw right and wrong. I saw, who's doing what good. And then just the dynamics of Afghanistan, this country, where what's going on, in Logar is completely different of what's going on, in Paktika, whether TTP's the enemy's using or the populace, just whatever. It was just so diverse and so different. So I really got to dive into a lot of that. Kind of that brain power, if you will, to understanding operations and planning and what's going on. And then at the same time, all the other NCOs that were there on the camp with me were all, E8 and E9 operators. So I was like going to the range like 3 or 4 days a week if I wasn't on a mission with the boss, with these like badass Delta Force dudes and guys from like who had backgrounds in the CRIF and so I just learned from them. So basically, like, I was running, learning all these drills and getting my gun on and them helping me set up my kit. So like tactically, they were training me to be an assaulter and like a better Green Beret. And I'm also seeing all this other stuff that's going on at this big level, big picture with the boss. And then as an 18 Echo, the other thing I was able to really tie into and start to tap into, which really helped me when I got to my ODA, was, so like ATAC wasn't out then. ISR was kind of like just starting off, handheld stuff. So I really got into technology and like, how can I make it work for myself? So I was able to also just test stuff and pick people's brains. I'm on the best special operations compound in the country. So I started getting into, I was using APAS at the time, and now ATAC's big, but it was a Navy thing the pilots are using. So I was able to like track stuff. You see the guys wearing the grip kit or the phone basically on their kit. So I was doing that stuff very early. I was carrying radios where I could use, get the downlinks and directly get the feeds from all the ISR, learn how to move that around. I went to like a JFO course with some of the CCTs that were out there. So I became a fight, being able to help them control fires. And it was just for me, like, how do I make myself a better asset? And then halfway through that deployment, my sergeant major made a deal with me. He said, if you stay there for 6 months, I'll send you to an ODA in 3rd Battalion and you can stay in country. So right on. I knew I wanted to work the commando mission, and I just requested that from my sergeant major. Said, hey, could you please send me into an ODA who needs an 18 Echo that's on a commando op. And I did. I ended up going to 3313. That was my first ODA. And it was really cool to be a part of. I was a senior guy kind of for the Army, but like the brand new, treat you like the new guy on the team. But I had a great team sergeant who saw my experience level and what I brought to the table. And then I was able to bring a lot of that technology and things to the battlefield, kind of eyes and ears for my captain on operations, and kind of dip everyone's toe in kind of the way forward in some of this technology and the way we use radios and communications and whatnot. As well as, because I'd been through the 18 Bravo course, I was also really good at mortars, and I really enjoyed firing mortars, everything about the mortar system, running FDC. So I knew how to do those things as an 18 Echo, which definitely gave me more value as a Green Beret. And when I looked at that, especially the end of that 2013 deployment, what I was now as a Green Beret was, I had been somebody who had experience in law enforcement. I was a soldier the whole time as well. I'd been to Iraq. I'd been a leader. I've been a drill sergeant. I know as a Green Beret, our primary mission is to force multipliers, to train others and go out on missions with them. And that's exactly what we're doing as the commandos. We're training these commandos, and then we're taking them out on missions. As a drill sergeant, I know what it takes for 2 guys to train 100 people. Like, I've done this before, so that was experience. And then, Ranger school and Sabre school and all the things I've been through were all just training evolutions to continue to make me a better and better soldier. And then now being a Green Beret, 18 Echo was a better route at the time looking back on it, because now I had been through the Bravo course. It wasn't like I wasn't trained. So I have this skill set that I learned. I've been through sapper school, so I know a lot about engineering and demolitions, and I can be an asset there with the 18 Charlies and the Special Forces engineer guys, to patrolling and ranger school, and I offer a lot to the 18 Bravos and what they're teaching, and I understand tactics. And then, kind of putting the icing on the cake of seeing this from a very high level, strategic level, really helped develop me as a Green Beret. And it was like the coolest thing that could happen to me personally, from that experience in the Q course of almost not graduating to ending this really cool deployment that was almost a year long, that was just so different in so many aspects.
So what does ODA stand for?
Operation Detachment Alpha.
Yeah. Okay. So what does that mean?
So that's in Special Forces, we work in 12-man teams. And you have an officer, a captain officer, and he is the team leader. And then you have a chief warrant officer, which is the assistant team leader. And then you have your team sergeant, which is 18 Zulu. It's what I was before I retired. It is like the best job in Special Forces. You are the man, the officer. We're not really officer driven, which is really cool. And then you have two guys, a junior and a senior of the other 4 MOSs. So you have two 18 Bravos, which is a weapons sergeant. You have two 18 Charlies, which are engineers. You have two 18 Deltas, which are medics. And then you have two 18 Echoes, which are communications. Then we have one more job that's an 18 Fox, which is intelligence. But to be an 18 Fox, you have to have been another MOS, right? I believe it's at least 3 years. So anybody can go to the 18 Fox course, but it's the guy, you're kind of the 2IC to the team sergeant. You're the second NCO in charge of everybody. But you're also in charge of all the intelligence and intelligence gathering. So in that Special Forces team, we're able to work off our own intelligence. We're a bottom-up driven organization versus a top-down. So we're trying to send as much intelligence to higher so they can start to put pieces together and really action targets. We do have a DA mission, but it's not exactly kind of our main thing. Our main thing is really being able to be a force multiplier and at the same time gather all this intelligence to be able to action targets, whether that's through our partner force or that's on a higher, we got HVTs and the Rangers and Delta Force are going to go hit those or whatever. So we're really in this very collecting intelligence centered mindset as a Green Beret. But yeah, that's how it works. So that 18 Fox kind of ties all that together. Those are all the MOSs. And then all those guys are what comprise an SFODA, which stands for Special Forces Operation Detachment Alpha.
Yeah. It almost sounds like, an ODA team can just go in and to a small town and almost like that force multiplier.
Absolutely. And that's what
train
we do.
Up a lot of people, like 12 guys could train 2,000 people to be that much bit better at their job, and which could be, enabling someone in their own country to fight their own battles. Yes,
that's exactly what it is. You're trying to empower them to fight for their own freedom, their own country, their own, whatever they're fighting for. I don't ever, now that I'm retired too, it's hard not to think about the politics and the evil crookedness behind some of the things that we've been forced to do as soldiers. But, so I never think of that. I just know that, hey, we're empowering them to fight for their own rights and their own freedom and what they want as a people. So that's really cool. Instead of us, dying and doing it, and I think that also gives an asset to the military for us as that force multiplier, because it keeps, like I said, it just keeps, the general soldiers having to do these big full frontal assaults, like World War II style things. And, what you see in in Ukraine and Russia type of engagements, and, keeping it smaller. Obviously we volunteered for our mission set. We know what we're doing. We want to be there. We want to do this. This is our calling in life. So, I think that more dangerous, skill set is something that the guys know in special operations, what they're doing and why they're doing it.
Yeah.
And I think it's a better route than the latter, this massive force on force, full scale invasion operation stuff. A lot of people die. It's that are Americans or are Australians or whatever country is representing.
Yeah, no, agreed. So from there, then you deployed to Iraq to engage with ISIS.
Yes. Yeah. So my next combat deployment was to Iraq, and that was basically ISIS is going on. So we were just trying to push ISIS back. It was weird being there. After being there, I had been there, I want to say it was almost 10 years apart, and seeing the old military bases ripped to shreds and what Iraq was. And it was just weird, and then the other hard thing was a lot of my mentors and guys that were older than me in special forces were, especially one of my big mentors that was on Camp Alpha that year in 2013, influenced my Green Beret career immensely. He was part of the CIF or whatever they're called now. They've changed their name so many times. CRIF. It's like Crisis Response Force, or they are like they are a special unit in special forces that are comprised of squadrons, a lot like Delta Force. So they have assaulters and snipers, and they operate in two different squadrons in that form. Do a lot of high value targets, as well as hostage rescue scenarios, those kind of things. They stood up the ICTF, which was their partner for us during the height of Iraq. So all the Sadr City stuff, from 04 to 09 or 08, when it was just crazy. Those special forces CIF units were deploying there all the time and training those guys and going on missions with them. That was once we pulled out of Iraq and ISIS kicked off, those were the guys they just sent out to go die. And almost every single one of the guys that we trained and partnered with had been killed. The other guys that we still had left were old sergeant majors and officers, and they were all shot up and jacked up and that were still around. So it was kind of a weird thing, because we did take a lot of pride in the commandos we were training and working with, because of that relationship that our mentors and guys we knew, our leadership, our sergeant majors and all these other senior team sergeants and stuff had developed with them. So that was kind of a weird, kind of a heavy feeling, to see these guys just, we're basically recreating something my, predecessors had done a few years earlier, because they had all been killed. So that was one of my favorite deployments, though, because I was able to do so much on my, not necessarily just, when I say on my own, I want people to think I'm like Jason Bourne's spy, working in a very clandestine way, who I was partnered with, the things in the operation, the missions and what we did. So cool. I lived at the embassy in my own apartment, and it was a really cool mission set, that I was able to do there. So great deployment. And, that was Iraq, 6 months in Iraq doing that. And primarily what we were doing was my role there. I was the lead advisor to, the CTS intelligence, general. And, I'm in these high level meetings, as a E7 Green Beret with 4-star generals from the Army and 4-star generals from Iraq, and, advising and just doing my thing. And, it was really cool to be a part of. And again, my deployment, the way my career had led up before then, I could have never have done that and helped my team the way I was able to, if I hadn't experienced the experience I had in 2013 with the generals and the admirals and my team and just everything I went through that year. Doing
that gig where you had that close protection security, that sort of helped you out for that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
So then from Iraq, after that, is that when you started sort of, thinking about life after the military?
No, not yet. So I had about 4 years left in the Army. My mother had been really sick the whole time I was in the Army. And, I was like, man, I want to get closer to my mom, what can I do? And my sergeant major was visiting us in country one day, and he was just, he knew my mom was sick and what was going on with her. And he was like, dude, you want to go to 10th group? I was like, really? I can do that? He's like, yeah, I'll just send you to Colorado. You'd be close to your mom. And then he's like, we do stuff like that all the time. So I basically went from 3rd Special Forces Group in North Carolina to 10th Special Forces Group in Colorado after I got back from that Iraq trip. And then I didn't have much time left in the Army, and Special Forces gives you a full year to retire. So I just had a few years left, and I had a good experience. I went from only going to Iraq and Afghanistan. I come to Colorado, and I immediately I start to learn to ski. It felt like home to me because I hadn't been in the mountains in Montana and been there in so long. It really kind of just was like, man, I miss this so much. So started skiing, and I was on a mountain team, and then I became the team sergeant of a mountain team. And, we were responsible for countering Russian aggression above the Arctic Circle. So we were on Arctic warfare, specialized in Arctic warfare as a mountaineering team. So that's kind of our infill method. In Special Forces, each team has an infill method, and it kind of describes what that team is. So, you have your scuba teams and their divers, you have your free fall teams. Everybody's airborne qualified, everybody jumps in. But before, I was on a recce team for a long time, and we, fly everywhere, jump out, walk everywhere. We're kind of long range reconnaissance stuff. And this was my first time I was on a mountain team. So very similar long range movements, but in very mountainous terrain, and alpine terrain as well. So super rad to start training that and learn that. And then I did a deployment to Sweden as a team sergeant, and we went up there and, work with Swedish Special Forces. We also went through, a very high level Swedish, Arctic warfare course. And that was phenomenal training and just such a cool experience. We just kind of help the Northern Partners patrol and practice and rehearse for real world scenarios with being able to counter the Russians.
Yeah, I mean, such a big space right now, such a big talking point of the world, especially with Sweden and that starting to join NATO.
Yeah.
But cold as well, right? Would have been freezing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, brutally cold. Yeah, I don't know what the temperature is in Fahrenheit, but -40. Yeah, I think -40 is the same in both.
It is.
Yeah,
it is.
So it's there's nights, and what's really cool was the Swedes and the Finnish guys love my team because of my attitude. I've always been just straight ranger, we'll sleep in the dirt type shit. And my team, I'm always really big on, we got to be really good at the basics, skill level 1, skill level 2 tasks, ranger tasks. And we were, if the Swedes were sleeping in the snow, we were sleeping in the snow. If the Finn, we didn't change anything we did. Other guys are dragging tents with them and stuff. We're we don't need no fucking tents. I'll dig a hole and we'll sleep in the snow. We just took on that same thing, and it was so cool for those guys to man, love it. It was a very cool time to be a team sergeant and have my team also feel that of hell yeah, these dudes and it sucks. It's miserable, but to have them kind of have our backs and be proud of us as Americans for doing, learning with them and keeping up with them, or trying to keep up with them best we can, and not just building a big white man fire or something because we're cold,
Yeah, yeah, mate. I've only, my personal experience with the cold was New York City over Christmas, probably maybe 10 years ago now, or 8 years ago, and it was it got to -3 or 4, and that was enough for me. That was it. That was it. I couldn't take it.
Yeah, man.
I had to have 2 jumpers on, gloves, 2 pairs of socks, everything.
Yeah, man. It's cold ain't fun, that's for sure.
Yeah. So let's so from there, is that when you sort of started thinking about your discharge?
If I wasn't married, wife and kids, I would have just stayed in the Army until they kicked me out, 35 years or whatever. I'd just done, I love being a soldier, man. I loved it. But I knew I was retiring at 20 no matter what. I was just being in a family, the average special operations guy in the United States is gone 278 days a year. And that's not including yeah, that's training. You're just gone, deployment, training, all that stuff. But it's also like not counting like days you got to be in at like 04 for manifest for jumps, or like, and the more responsibility you have, like I'm the primary jump master. So like I'm out on for 4 days straight, like in charge of all these jumps going on. So I'm leaving my house at 3 a.m. and not coming home until, 10 o'clock at night. And those kind of things are just repetitive, right? You don't have to see the kids, all that. And to be honest, man, I was just tired of that. I was just like, and then 10th group didn't take care of its guys the way 3rd group did to me. Like I was just kind of like, I saw it was like more army and less personality, meaning like, because when they do slating for things, like once you're a certain rank, you can only do something for so long. So like I was already a team sergeant. So the next step for me is like another seat at that same rank somewhere else. But that could have been an ROTC instructor in Florida, or it could have been, going to Germany in 3rd battalion or 1st battalion or something like that. Like it's so broad. And when they're selecting these things, a lot of times they're selecting for you're either just a rank in an MOS, they need to fill a bullet, or they're selecting you because they want to look good. Like if 10th Special Forces Group is going to take over, has to be the 1st sergeant slot at SOCOM down in Tampa, they're going to send their best guy, a squared away dude. But what if the best guy, squared away dude, doesn't want to go to Tampa? And like literally what I would see happen, because it happened to my guys, was like, I had a guy on my team who did not want to go to Germany, and he said, if I go to Germany, my wife's going to leave me. He wanted to go to Fort Bragg because his wife was going to finish her degree. She was trying to be a doctor, and he was going to go to Fort Bragg to be an instructor for the Special Forces course, and that's what he wanted to do. Same MOS, same rank. There's another team sergeant, and he's got a guy that his wife is German. He wants to go to Germany, but he's slated to go to Fort Bragg and be an instructor at the same course that this dude wants to be an instructor, and they're the same MOSs. So I'm like, how are we not changing these two dudes? And they wouldn't. And that's when like little things like that as a leader that would like piss me off so bad, that it was like the army just wasn't taking care of these guys. And it was another thing that was kind of simultaneously happening. As a leader, as a team sergeant, seeing this and being affected by it and doing everything I could to help get my guys' career progression what made sense. And at the end of the day, you're a soldier in the army, you got to go do what you're told. We talked about that. But if there's a way to like, it doesn't do anything to you, you're still getting what you need. And we can also keep marriages together and guys happy and guys wanting to do this job. Why are we not facilitating that? Especially when these guys are gone 279 days a year. Like, this is fucking ridiculous, So I knew like I'm dropping my retirement packet at 19. As soon as I was eligible to drop my retirement packet, I dropped it. And I had about 8 or 9 months to like fully retire. I mean, I went to work. I texted my sergeant major like once a week, was like, hey, I'm good. I'm alive. I went to work like once a month. Went to my appointments or whatever. And then that was it. And shortly after that, I had a buddy that was working anti-human trafficking stuff in Africa. And, just like most guys, like my background was like, oh, what's next? A contracting job or something, right? So I get all spun up and start assisting this company, this nonprofit. And then COVID happens. Everything gets turned off. We can't travel. We can't be in Africa. So the same time, though, it was like one of the most rewarding missions that I've ever been a part of. Was like, I never really struggled with like, am I a good guy or bad guy, when I was deployed, but it was one of those things was like, am I really helping? Like, sometimes you're seeing that you help and sometimes you're not, and so it was one of those things where like, we're physically rescuing these ladies and these kids. It was like, wow, this is it. So, at the same time, kind of during COVID, like everything's locked down, it just got me thinking. I was like, man, I want to do this for my own people, like Americans. The Native community is so affected, and my mother was so big into like trying to help Native women. And both my parents and my mom and my dad were just those type of people who always help people and did things. And, it was nothing like I'd come home on leave from the army and like one of my brother's friends is like living at the house for a little while with my parents or something, or they were just these amazing people who just help people and always wanted to affect their community. And, so I was like, man, I'm going to do it. So I saw like all the issues going on in the Native community, with the MMIW crisis, which stands for Missing, Murdered, and Indigenous Women. And, I just kind of started reaching out to families through social media. I retired and started social media like a week after I retired. And I basically was just see these things going on, and I was helping families. And then I was like, man, I need a way to pay for it. So I started Warparty Movement, which is a t-shirt company, and essentially just a t-shirt company. I was using them funds to like anything from, helping my search and rescue efforts, paying for gas and food to get up somewhere to go help these people, or food, food for them. They want to cook, make fry bread or something for all the people searching and helping them, to like paying for therapy for ladies, to, just kind of a broad way we were using the money. And that was like 3 years ago. And now we've really kind of transitioned into some other really cool things. About halfway through that, about a year and a half ago, we started a nonprofit arm of it called Warparty Ranch. And the reason how that came about was, I helped a lady get out of a really bad situation on an Indian reservation. And it took me a while to find a place to like where we could take her. So we ended up getting her a place in Santa Fe, New Mexico that had a safe house, had a bed for her, and she could stay there. She ended up having like some religious issues, like they wouldn't let her burn sweetgrass and sage and pray. And it was like a Catholic place, but it was the only place with a bed. And so she ended up leaving there. And I found out, like, I was calling to check on her, and they're like, well, she hasn't been here in a week. And then trying to figure out where she went. Well, she ended up overdosing on fentanyl in Pueblo, another city in Colorado. So it was just like, man, what the fuck? Like, I thought we were like, I was helping people. I thought, like, am I doing the right thing? Like, what are we doing? And at the same time, I'll get into like my cowboy journey and like that too. But at the same time, I had like these cool female friends, and I'm a girl dad. Like, I had these like cool ladies who always were just like doing rad things. And one of them was like a mentor of mine, like a cowboy mentor. I'm like, dude, there's gotta be more. Like, I see the gratitude and the things and the healing and the confidence these ladies have, these badass cowgirls. Like, this is something we could do. So basically what we did was we try to create like an aftercare program, or even a before care program with Warparty Ranch, where we can take ladies who are at risk or who have already been in some kind of situation and help heal them through warrior skills. A lot of it starts in like the Western, agriculture, the ranching community, but it's also, hunting, self-defense, with firearms and without firearms. A lot of like get your brain going, situation awareness, just how dangerous things are, and the reality of statistics. And just sometimes people are so unaware, they don't realize like how dangerous it can be for them. So we do all that to include, we do some sponsorships that we have in the rodeo world, and still very connected to the Western world. So we have kind of like these little cowgirl boot camps or clinics that we teach. And that is kind of our way forward with Warparty Ranch, is this clinic model to teach these ladies warrior skills, to empower them, help them, get on their feet, or so they understand red flags and never put themselves in that type of situation to begin with. On the Warparty Movement side now, basically what we do is, my business partner and I, he's was in third grade with me, and he worked for the agency for a long time. Now what we focus on is we've been fulfilling some police contracts and military contracts for training. And what we're doing, we use the money we make from that to train tribal law enforcement for free and other law enforcement for free. So we developed a pistol course that we're getting ready to start teaching and training civilians. It will be open to the public, kind of our first time. We usually only do the ladies. But what it allows us to do is offer the ladies from Warparty Ranch scholarships for our courses. So basically, when you're a student at one of our courses, you pay $500 to come shoot with us for the weekend and learn all these skills from us. it pays for other people, other ladies to be able to come through the program. And that just helps the profit, the nonprofit keep their costs down. And, it's weird with firearms and regulations and, what we do. So instead of trying to, own like 10 Glocks that we only train the ladies on, it's like, hey, we'll let us figure it out until the nonprofit can kind of crack that code on what's best for training a lot of ladies. But this will allow us to definitely, continue that warrior spirit and what we train and talk about with both organizations, and then allow us to give back to first responders and the law enforcement, and also assist us in those search and rescue efforts, and continue just to build allies and more people who have that warrior mindset and are aware of human trafficking, and whether it's on the reservation, off the reservation, just getting people to, instead of walking around, in their own bubble. Warriors don't walk around in a bubble. Like you have to receive so much information and process so many things about life. And it's this forever journey. And it's why, like, the wisest men of all time, from scripture you read to stories you read, doesn't matter. They're all warriors. They're all this path of these warriors, these old men who are now teaching these guys these things. And I look at that just part of that process of, like, we want to continue to try to spread that and share that in the community, in hopes that people can keep themselves safe and they're just more aware of their surroundings and being able to see something, say something type stuff, but also protect themselves and train to protect themselves and their family. And unfortunately, especially in the Native community, this is so key. Native women are 10 times more likely to be murdered than any other race in our country. And, just seeing the crime rate and what they're just statistically can be susceptible to. We really want to try to make these women deadly and train them so they're not a soft target, that they are a hard target. And for me, it hits home. My daughters I'm a girl dad, and I have a 25-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old daughter. So it's, my daughters fall directly in those statistics and exactly what's going on with the other Native ladies. Our organization is not just about Native women. We do work and help all women that we can in whatever capacity we can. But we definitely have a focus on educating the general public about the issues in the Native community. And then we strive to always train and give back to the Native community the best way that we can. So that's basically kind of a rundown of my transition of my next mission, from being a Green Beret to being a dad that's just trying to, make this a better place for my kids. But that is a mission for mine, and really helps keep me go focused and things to work towards, and constantly improve myself and sharpen my own skills as a warrior to be able to teach these and continue to bring these to people and pass those along.
Yeah. Do you think you're, I don't know, like, do you think that your warrior journey will never end? It will just keep going? No. Like, you'll just keep giving your knowledge and passing on experience to the day you die?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's cool.
And I look at it like, I have an analogy, and it's kind of dark, but there's like a way to look at it through like both lenses, if you will. But here's my problem with, or not problem, like kind of a bro science version of like what's going on in the veteran community and who you are and what happens to you as a veteran, a combat veteran. If you take a dog, this badass pit bull, and you train it to fight and you teach it to fight, and it becomes this badass fighting dog, doesn't matter if it only fought for a little while or it's been fighting for 15 years. That dog knows one thing. You can't all of a sudden one day just be like, all right, you're retired, buddy. Good job. You don't have to fight dogs anymore. You can't take him to the dog park and walk him and let him run around with other dogs. He's going to tear everything to pieces. He doesn't know anything else besides fighting and surviving those fights, and everything he knows is about that. His reward for his behavior, the extra food you give him, everything he's gotten is because he's done good at fighting and killing other dogs, period. And we are a lot like that, especially when you're indoctrinated into the military and you have all these things removed from you. You become a soldier, and then the only thing you know is being a soldier. And no matter if that's 4 years or that's 40 years, you're indoctrinated into this thing, which is, it's not negative. It is very positive. Like, it's the one place where it is like the epitome where all walks of life, colors, creeds, religions, doesn't matter, like come together. They're all brothers, they're all sisters, and they accomplish a common goal. And it's like hardly anywhere in the world do you see that other than like in the military, you know? But at the same time, when you get out, you have so much loss and trauma. And when I say loss, like you don't even have to have been in any significant gunfights or things happen to you, but your identity of who you are was removed from you and given a new one. And now you're like, who am I? You have so much loss, all your friends, all your work, you have to start over. Do you go back to your hometown and go back with all your high school mates and all your buds there, or what, so it's like you're in this weird time. And the longer you spend in the military, the longer that all of those things, that the longer distance all that becomes. So like that dog, you're gonna have to retrain yourself to have discipline and have you can't fight every dog. Okay, there's might be some dogs you need to fight, but you can't fight every one of them, bud. And you have to figure out that dog, right? You can't just throw them out there. And I think what happens to us is we ended up being that dog that just gets thrown in the dog park, and then they wonder why we're like suicide rate, addiction, whatever it is, all the problems that we have, mental health things, and all of it. Because there is no process. There is no what right looks like to help someone transition out of the military. We've all sat on the stupid computer and watched the mandatory classes and blah, 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 but no one can set you up for you having to start your life completely over and reinvent yourself. The other thing with that is just naturally as human beings, we reinvent ourselves. We're kind of a different person every 5 to 10 years, like your 25-year-old self isn't who you are at 30. Your 30-year-old self isn't who you are at 40. And those are all, like when you said that journey as a warrior, those are all things that if you take it and you don't look at it as just like, I use the analogy of a dog to get you to understand like how kind of crazy that sounds. But when you look at it as progressing through life and taking those skills and how do I apply these warrior skills, these very a lot of it's very traditional. There's a lot of really great things you learn tradition in the military that can improve your life and help you farther on in life. So I don't ever think that warrior mindset, and for me, that journey will ever be over, because I always, want to be that example of a warrior and doing what's right. And I feel that like for me and my culture and for most cultures around the world, the word warrior, the way elite soldiers and elite warriors have carried themselves, whether it's a samurai or whatever, it's been in a very, it's always been in a good way. They're always trying to do the right thing. So I look at that term warrior as a man who's not afraid to do the right thing.
Yeah, I really like that. And I really like your description of, that like dog in the fight, so many times blokes leave the military and they're still like this hyper vigilant, hyperactive, pit bull that's sort of ready to go at any time. But yeah, like in Australia, I think as well as probably every military or every country around the world that has a effective military, they really, really struggle to demilitarize their guys. And it's like it was a massive thing with me, right? I left the military and came back home, and I just didn't really have an identity. I didn't understand who I was. I just came from this like military figure that was in Afghanistan, and then came back home and I felt like I was a nobody.
Yeah.
So I really struggled with that transition massively. And it's just like you were talking about, and I've probably found a bit of comfort over the last few years with trying to get back to that like warrior mentality, being the best person that I can be, being the fittest person I can be. Yeah, just trying to like adapt that type of warrior mentality, I think has really helped me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's too easy to woe with me, and life's so easy right now. It's easy to be alive. You live in the countries we live in, and as much as we bitch and complain about all this stuff, it's easy, right? You're not pulling watch around the fire with a spear for saber-toothed tigers. So, life, and I think the farther we've gotten away from doing that, the more we've gotten away from our own mental health and who we are as people, because now we're navigating this landscape that's a false reality and things that don't exist. And you're so safe that it's so easy, in my opinion, to not be my grandfathers, to not be those guys who stormed on the beaches of Iwo Jima and, invaded on D-Day, invaded France and Normandy. It's like, life's so easy now that we have this ability to complain about everything, to have all these mental health issues. And, we can go down that, but it's like, yeah, the food you're eating, the water you're drinking, all these other things. But it's also like, it's like, but we're just so disconnected from the farther we get away from nature, the farther we get away from actually being rooted in that, the harder it is for us mentally to be stable. I think that just seems very common. I'm very big in being in nature and being outdoors. Has been my whole life. When I retired from the Army, the other thing that I really wanted to reinvent myself and do was kind of that, who am I? What am I? And my whole life, I just wanted to be a cowboy. I want to be like my grandpa. And I said, you know what? I don't know if this is right. I don't know. I'm going to try to do this the right way I can and really honor traditions of other cowboys and do this the right way. And so I was like, yeah, I'm going to become a cowboy. And I've been doing it for like 4 years now. And it's so fun because I tell people all the time, it is, you got to do new things. You got to be the new guy. You got to be the guy who doesn't know. You can't be the expert. The hardest thing for guys that were special forces, special operations guys, most guys have never been bad at anything in their lives. And it's easy to do things, right? I teach you how to shoot. It's easy to learn how to shoot and do these things, but there's certain skills, and being a cowboy and a horseman is one of those skills that takes a lifetime to be good at, to be elite at. It takes a lifetime. And it's so cool just working and just, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, do what I'm told, and learning and just being a sponge and being the new guy and doing all the shit work and whatever, I love it. And it's so humbling. And I think we need that. And I think that for me, being a Green Beret, it's like, that's just part of me. It's just a chapter in the book, and it's not the whole book. I'm trying to write some more cool chapters now, doing what I'm doing. But that humbleness of just like learning something new and trying to rope and ride and do a good job, being a good stockman and being a good horseman, there's just so much into it. And it's also just so healing because you're out in nature, you're outside. My imagination, we talked about before, it's like every time I get on a horse and my right foot hits the stirrup, it's like I rewind time like 200 years, and just takes me somewhere, and it's very healing for me. Been one of the best outlets I've ever had for whether it's tough times or I have a lot of brain injuries, which I know a lot of people have. And when you don't really understand that, if you do understand your brain injuries, you understand that like some days you're just gonna have bad days, right? You got to be able to tell yourself you have a broken brain. Dude, your brain is broken. Because it's like, my life is awesome. Why am I so sad? It's like, you have a broken brain. And fortunately, I have the ability to like go catch a horse, go saddle a horse and go for a ride or just go for a hike or a run in the mountains or something and just leave all that, so I always just tell people the biggest thing for me has been not being scared to reinvent myself on something completely new that I'm not an expert in. And it's been the funnest thing I've ever done. And doing it in nature, surrounding myself with the things the Creator created and not things that man created. And that's been just phenomenal, man. And along with, Warparty mission and trying to influence the community, it's really given me so much drive and passion after, a career that most people would say was a great career. For me, I was just trying to be a good soldier every day, and so it's really cool to be able to do that now and have that same thing my dad would say, like you never work a day in your life if you love what you do.
Yeah. I really, really like that as well, like the reconnecting point. And, you mentioned before about, that mental side of things, how, all this, like this whole military career is potentially messed up something in your brain. But the way that you combat that is to just get out in nature.
Yeah.
And, just go ride a horse, and then it connects you back to your like ancestors as well. And you feel like you're, rewound 200 years and It's all to do with this, like being out in nature is just this amazing drug that you can get given, and it's for free, and everyone can get it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So like one of the things that we do, my mom taught me, and tobacco is like big. It's in ceremony and in a way as like an offering. My kids do it all the time. Since I was a kid, it's like if you find a rock, a cool rock or something, you put some tobacco down where you found that rock, and you thank the creator, like thank God, like for this, right? If you're going to take something or do something, whatever. And when I said my kids do it, it'd be nothing like my buddies just standing there putting a big dip in, and my daughter runs up and she's like 5. And it's like, I need some dip. And they're like, what? I'm like, just give her dip, And she's found a cool rock or a feather. She wants to like put some tobacco down, right? But something I do because of the way, just through learning this with my mother and my grandfather and my family was, the tobacco is also like a physical representation of something. So what I tell people to do, I'm like, you don't have to be native. You don't have to believe in what I believe in. But I was like, I'm also a Christian. So when I'm like saying the creator, I'm saying exactly what somebody else is God. And it is weird to me. I'm just kind of adding this caveat. It's weird to me that people think that are Christians think that like, you think God waited until the 1600s to teach the entire Western hemisphere about Christianity? So because we say words differently, or we have a little bit different story, we still have the same story of the son coming and to being sacrificed on a tree, and we have everything's the same, and it matches the Bible, it matches stuff, and people don't. So anyways, but what we do is I take that tobacco and I'll go out in the woods, whether it's a run, hike, whatever, and I smoke marijuana. And I don't do any drugs. I don't do any medications. I'm prescribed. I'm 100% disabled. Most of that's from brain trauma. I have 2 stomach diseases, and I have a lot of nerve damage in my hands and feet. To go with all the back stuff and some of the other common cool guy carrying heavy shit issues. But I'm prescribed 22 different medications to include opioids and SSRIs from the VA. And I'm like, I've seen what it does to people. And I'm like, there's no way I'm taking this shit, man. So I just use a very well-rounded approach. I use marijuana like a vitamin or like a medication, for kind of some pain management there. I have a medical grade water device, so I'm drinking like the purest, cleanest water I can drink. I'm on an all carnivore diet. I eat animal. I do eat fruit, so just animal and fruit. I work out, like I fucking wrestle 3 days a week. I go to wrestling 1.5-hour practices 3 days a week. Like I do everything I can to try to be physically fit and be the best version of myself I can, because that is what I've found makes me the best mentally as well. And when I'm in my best state mentally, because again, going back onto like, I think we're all hard on ourselves, right? Like I doubted myself for so long that I could even be some Ranger or Green Beret or anything, and it's easy to self-doubt when you don't feel good, and you don't look good and you're not healthy. So what I do is I go out of the woods and I got a joint. I sit there and by a creek or in the mountains or whatever. And I like to take my shoes off, so I'm barefoot, and I just lay in the grass and talk to Jesus, And what I do is whatever I'm carrying around, whatever burdens I have, whatever's heavy on me, I take that tobacco and I physically tie it to a tree or put it down. And it's a physical representation of all the burdens, all the bullshit that I have in my mind that I'm carrying around that I don't need to be. And I just give it to the creator. I say, hey, this is yours. Like, he's here to help me, to carry these burdens for me. There's no reason for me to be, sad about this or worried about that or whatever the problem is I'm going through. And I just physically take that tobacco as a physical representation and give it into the creator. And I've shown people this and talked to them about it, and I've taken lots of buddies up to the mountains and other veterans, other people, ladies that work with Warparty that are native who understand the same thing, or some that aren't, and shared that with them. And it's been a really cool experience to hear the feedback, and people continue to still use that, and really puts them in that mindset of, hey, I'm not alone in none of this, and leaning on their faith, but also, like I said, just a really cool, tangible way to say, this isn't mine anymore. Thank you, Jesus. This is yours.
I really like that. It's, you're just getting grounded with nature, and then, yeah, you're having that like spiritual connection where you can sort of just handball some stuff off. And, you know, like you don't have to deal with everything. And look, you know, in Australia, we're not, and you'd probably know with working with some Australians that we're not super spiritual sort of people. I don't think I've ever really, I might have stepped foot into a church a few times in my earlier life, but yeah, you know, it's just nothing that, it's just not in our culture for that type of spiritual connection. But I definitely do agree with that, you know, getting grounded, connecting with nature, and just having a time where you like need to you know push things back onto something else that isn't you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, man, I really like that. I really dig it. It's cool. Look, we're going to start wrapping up, and I have one question before I do wrap this up, and it's if you could give your 18-year-old self one bit of advice about life, what would it be?
If I could give my 18-year-old self, I don't know. I thought about it. Like I thought about this answer and like how I was going to answer this thing before I did it. And then when you said it to me, it just kind of hit differently again. But I think the biggest thing I would tell my 18-year-old self is to never be afraid to represent who you truly are. And who I truly am is I'm a mixed kid from Montana who's half Apache and half cowboy. And I forgot that a little bit on my path. And I think that remembering that after I've retired, if I could have filled that gap when I was a younger man, I think that would have been my advice to give. And it might not even make sense when I said it, but like, you know, don't forget who you are. And there was a time in my life where I just was so lost at things, and I think it might have even been, you know, a little bit of a distraction at times, but again, you know, just don't forget who you are. You're your mom's son and you're your dad's son, you know.
Look, mate, you've been a fantastic guest, and almost at it for 2 hours now.
Yes, sir.
So all the way from you know, the US, and I'm in Australia. So mate, thank you very much for that, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you.
That wraps up this episode. If you enjoyed it, please make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and follow. It really helps out our channel. If you're listening on a podcast platform, a quick review goes a long way. And don't forget to share the episode, tag your friends, and drop a comment. I always appreciate your feedback and love hearing your thoughts. Until every voice is heard.